We have one job in this life, and it's to find and fulfill the purpose for which we were born and perfectly matched. And when we do that, oh my goodness, buckle up, buttercup, because you never know where it's gonna take you.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate Bryan. One Girl Revolution is a multimedia platform, a podcast, and a nonprofit dedicated to highlighting the stories of inspiring women and girls who are changing the world through their lives. Please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. We're on YouTube at One Girl Revolution, and you can find all of our social media links, podcast episodes, documentaries, and so much more on our website at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com. This week's episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast features Rhonda Sciortino, founder of Successful Survivors Foundation. Rhonda has an incredible story, one of survival, passion, grit, love, friendship, and community. Rhonda was abandoned as a very young child and became a ward of the court until she was emancipated at the age of 16. Rhonda fought through her trials and difficulties, and at the age of 17, she became California's youngest licensed insurance agent. At the age of 27, Rhonda's passion for good child welfare providers and appropriate insurance intersected. She committed herself to protecting people and organizations that protect children. In 2008, Rhonda sold her company and went on to found and became chairperson of Successful Survivors Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping survivors of trauma find purpose, meaning, and happiness, and what she calls your real success. Rhonda is an author, motivational speaker, and so much more. You're going to love her and will be so inspired by her story. Here's my conversation with Rhonda. Rhonda, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome.
I'm so excited to have you on. I feel like it's been a long time coming because we have so many mutual friends and people kept mentioning to me, oh my gosh, you have to have Rhonda on. So I'm so grateful and excited to have you on to share your story and to talk about all the great work that you do. But before we get into your story, I would love to hear, who is a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
Oh my goodness, Kate. Okay. I can't name just one. There were actually three people. There have been many, many people who have crossed my path and changed my life, but three in particular. One was when I was 14 years old, and she was really my very first real friend. And I didn't realize until she befriended me that anybody would really be my friend. And the second person, well, her name is Janet, by the way. She passed away from breast cancer a number of years ago, but not before she completely changed my life. The second person was my typing, and I do mean typing teacher. We didn't call it keyboard back when I was in high school, but when I was a freshman in high school, and I realized that she treated me exactly the same as she treated everybody else. And if anything, she was a little bit harder on me because she knew from my file that I was a ward of the court and I didn't have great guidance. You could look at me to see, and I guess we'll get into story later, but it wasn't hard to figure out that I didn't have a good home life. And so she knew that if I was going to have any kind of a life at all, I was going to need to have some skills. So she taught me, I think I still hold the record for fastest typist at that high school and shorthand and, a bunch of things. And she's still, and I'm about to be 61 and she's still one of my best friends today. And the third one is my husband's aunt, Celestina Benvenuti. And she is an amazing woman who has faced a lot of suffering in her life. And she does it with humor. And so anytime I've ever been kind of in a down place, I can call Zia Celestina and she'll tell me a joke and she makes me laugh and she changes my perspective. So those are my three.
Those are
And
such great stories too, because it's like from different parts of your life, different sections of your life. And it's cool too, like how different people can make such a lasting impact. Like even sharing about your typing teacher, which I remember taking typing class. I don't know if they still teach it now. I feel like it's like an iPhone class or something, but those were the days. But just the power that we all have, teachers, friends, you think about little kids, like your first friend, somebody that just paid attention to you. And I think it's so impactful. We can have such an impact on other people. Sometimes we don't even know, right? Like sometimes we don't even know the impact that we can make on someone else's life.
that's exactly right. I think for me, the people who have influenced me in a positive way more than others, it always comes down to dignity. They made eye contact with me, gave me time, really listened. I don't mean superficially listened while they were formulating their response in their mind, but really actively listened and cared. And all of that for me translates into dignity. So I think to be a revolution in somebody else's life, there has to be dignity giving. That's my take on it.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to think about it because we need that more than ever in the world, especially, you think about walking down the street and how all of us, and I'm definitely guilty of that, you just kind of have your eye on the prize of like what you need to get done and you're running from one place to another. Our lives get so busy that sometimes we just don't even pay attention to the people around us and how a simple smile or a simple hello or just recognizing the other human being right in front of us can have is so powerful. So I totally agree with you that is a revolution.
Yep, absolutely.
So I want to talk about your life because there's so much to cover, and I'm really like I'm so inspired by you, what you're doing now, and how you've been through so much in your life. And now you've turned it into helping others and you're doing so much great work. But I would love to rewind and talk about your early life and just a little bit about your background and your story.
Okay. Well, my mother left me with a neighbor and asked the neighbor to babysit while she went shopping, but she didn't go shopping. Her bags were packed and her car was loaded, and she moved out of state. The lady she left me with had 5 kids. So when the diapers were gone and the formula was gone, I think I was 6 months old or something. So maybe there wasn't formula, I don't know. But they started, back in those days, there wasn't internet, and there weren't cell phones, but so they started kind of putting out feelers like, where could she be? Is she dead on the side of the road somewhere? Why isn't she coming back for this kid? And so they finally called social services, and I wound up being placed with maternal grandparents. My grandfather was mentally ill, and my grandmother was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And so they lived in a 500 square foot shack, really, about the size of a garage, didn't have functional plumbing. Lots of times we didn't have electricity because they wouldn't pay the bill, and so the utilities would be shut off. There was no heat, there was no air conditioning, and those things were such luxuries. I didn't even know they existed when I was a kid. And a lot of times we didn't have food. We always had cigarettes and we almost always had alcohol. And my grandmother would buy the occasional baggie of pot or pills or whatever it was that she bought from the drug dealer next door. The neighborhood was wild. The next door neighbor, as I mentioned, was a drug dealer. The house after that was where the father and his oldest son bragged about having done a drive-by shooting. Killed the mother of, I think there were like 15 kids or something, killed their mother and then bragged about it. After that was the Hells Angels house. And so this was the neighborhood where I walked back and forth to school every day. Little white girl, you could see me from outer space because I was blonde with blue eyes. And my skin could not be whiter. You can see my insides, when you look. So it was a scary neighborhood, but I'm telling you, inside of my house was scarier. And so, because when you're dealing with someone with mental illness, there's no logic, you know? And so when I was 4 years old, my grandfather decided that he needed to start training me in the use of handguns. I mean, with God as my witness, you can't make this stuff up, right?
Wow.
So, I fired my first handgun when I was 4 years old, and then he taught me how to break down the gun and clean the gun. You would have thought that I was in training to be a Navy SEAL or something, or some kind of a bandit. I don't know. So he taught me how to pick locks when I was 8. He was a locksmith for a minute. And so, taught me his trade. It wasn't to break into houses. It was because that's what he knew how to do. And he taught me that. So it was a weird, wild upbringing. Can you get a picture of the nutcase that I must have been when I was a kid? So I mentioned the plumbing. We didn't have a shower. I didn't know that there was such a thing as showers. I didn't know that people washed their hair. I didn't know that people brushed their teeth. I didn't own a toothbrush till I was 13. And so then, you go to school, and I was like the little character on Pigpen that has on the Peanuts, Pigpen that has like the dirt kids dirty, clothes are dirty. That was me. And so I was pretty much always alone. Kids didn't want to play with me. Nobody wanted to sit next to me at lunch or whatever. And so when I met that first girl, it was, I think, the first period of the first day of high school. And she turned around and introduced herself, which she had done with other people. I automatically expected her not to do it to me because I had lived pretty much an invisible life. Because it's hard for people to look at you, when you're hard to look at, right? So she turned around and she introduced herself to me. Hi, I'm Janet. Who are you? What's your name? And why don't you come sit with me at lunchtime? And nobody had ever done that.
Wow.
And when she made eye contact with me, when she did that, when she called me by my name, it was dignity that I had never had before. So fast forward, we were homeless for a time because the little shack was damaged by fire. It was uninhabitable. It was an uninsured fire. So we basically went and lived in the park. I think it was 8 or 9 months that we lived in the park. So skipping ahead to, I had heard that there was such a thing as emancipation. And I wanted to get out from under the crazy house because my grandfather was very abusive. He would decide that he had done too much damage. And I would wake up in the middle of the night with a pillow over my head and have to fight off a 6'2" Irishman. And it's the most bizarre thing, but I knew, it's weird to say this, but I knew that in the best way that they knew how, they did love me, that they did care about me. Nevertheless, I wanted to emancipate when I found out about emancipation. And I hitchhiked down to the courthouse, and I waited all day to try to talk to a judge. I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't know you were supposed to take a social worker or a lawyer or something like that. And so finally, somebody had mercy on me, a bailiff, I think he was, and he took me back to a chambers of a judge. And I made my pitch to the judge. And the judge gave me this long list of things that I had to do in order to emancipate. And I think he thought he would never hear from me again. And, but it was, you had to get a job. And so my first job that my high school helped me get was in an insurance office. So remember, I was homeless because of an uninsured fire. So when the insurance agent who hired me started telling me that if somebody's house burns down, we're going to pay for them to be in a rental house, and we're going to pay for them to buy all new clothes that were destroyed. And we're going to pay for them to, he's going on and on. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? What in the world? Like, what? Tell me about insurance. This is amazing.
Right.
I was the most passionate person about insurance that you've ever met. So, I became the number one telemarketer for Farmers Insurance in the nation when I was 15.
Wow. That's amazing.
People like, are you insured? Are you sure? Do you know what you're covered for? I mean, I was just like a lunatic. And then I thought, it's not that hard what he's doing. I was making appointments for him to go out and write up the coverage. I'm like, why don't I just write up the coverage? I can do it over the phone. He's like, no, it requires a license. We're going to go to jail. But I wound up getting my license. I was the youngest licensed insurance agent in the state of California. They made an exception for me at 17 because the judge did grant me my emancipation at 16. And I spent the next 40 years in insurance and specializing in analyzing the way that kids and caregivers get injured in out-of-home placement. And then writing risk management programs to keep kids safe in care and to try to make sense of some of the tragedies that happen in foster care. So that's me. That's my story.
Yeah, it's so powerful to listen to you share your story. And women are so resilient. That's what I love so much about so many of the stories that we share in this podcast and everything that you're doing too. I love these stories of resilience and everything that you went through, and even just you didn't have a support system, right? Like you had that one friend, Janet, who probably was a gift to you at that time too, because that was when you really had to have the courage and stand up and speak for yourself and figure out a way to get out of the bad situation that you were in. But I just think it's incredible what you accomplished at such a young age.
Oh, you're so kind to say that. But I wouldn't have gotten that very first job if it wasn't for my teacher, Barb Naylor, and walking in and saying, yes, I type accurately at 110 words per minute, and I take 120 words per minute. Greg's shorthand. Nobody even knows what that is nowadays. But it got me my first job, and every other, it served me well. I mean, up to today, I'm about to have my 15th book released, and I've typed every word and written every word of every book and every article that I write, and I still every day thank God for Barb Naylor.
Yeah, that's amazing. The power of teachers and the power of people in our lives at such a young age. Teachers can change the trajectory of our lives, and even friends, and different things, all the stories that you've shared. Donate to One Girl Revolution's nonprofit organization to help us continue our work, highlighting inspiring women and girls that are changing the world through their lives, promoting their work and their organizations, and building a powerful and positive force out in the world dedicated to empowering women, their voices, and their stories. Donate at onegirlrevolution.com/donate. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com/donate. I'm so curious, Rhonda, and maybe there wasn't like a suddenly moment or a spark moment where you were like, because you look at your story, I listened to your story, and there are many different ways that it could have ended, right? Could have ended terribly. And
Right.
you are a miracle. Your story is a miracle. You're so resilient and you've accomplished so much. And I know the fire that's in you, because I think we all have that fire, but sometimes you have to find it. But was there a suddenly moment where you were like, I am not going to be a victim of how I was raised. I'm not going to repeat the things that everyone else around me is repeating. I'm going to stand on my own, and I'm going to change my life, and I'm going to be the victor of my story. Was there like a moment or something that happened that made you stand up and power forward?
Yes, absolutely. I lived the first 40 years of my life with a chip on my shoulder the size of the Empire State Building. I thought that I had been dealt a raw hand, and that everybody else on earth had a mother and father and an extended family who loved them, and everybody had what I didn't have. And, they got to have an actual childhood, and, and they got a traditional education, and, blah, 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 you name it. I was sad and self-pitying over that I didn't get those things. And so it was around my 40th birthday. It wasn't like a specific moment, but I did, over sort of a period of time, have a revelation that I didn't want to live that way anymore. I wanted to live with gratitude. And I realized that I didn't create a successful life. I mean, by that time I had 2 businesses. I had built a real estate and investment portfolio. I had done all these things, and I'm looking around and I'm going, okay, well, I would even say things like, okay, well, I might be wearing an Armani suit and driving a Porsche convertible, so you can take the girl off of the street, but you can't take the street out of the girl. I would say things like, don't start with me because I'll finish. I mean, I just had a crusty, hard, I will kick your arse into next week if you mess with me kind of attitude, right? And it was because of the bricks on my shoulders. And I realized, okay, this is not how to live. I don't feel joy. I don't feel peace. I don't feel gratitude for everything I have. And I just decided that I wanted healthy relationships with good people. I wanted peace. I wanted joy. I wanted good health, but not, I mean, that's not really the best way to put it. It's more like wellness. I wanted everything to be well with my soul. And I wanted enough financial provision to do what I was created to do. So I went from feeling like I've done this, I've succeeded despite all I went through in my life. I changed from that to saying more humbly, I am enjoying a successful life now because, not despite, because of everything I've been through. I wouldn't have been passionate about insurance if I hadn't been homeless as a result of an uninsured fire. I wouldn't have cared about children who have been abused and are now in the foster care system if I hadn't been in the foster care system for the first 16 years of my life, if I hadn't been beaten and burned and, woke up with a pillow over my head trying to suffocate me while I sleep. If I hadn't gone through it, I wouldn't understand it. And I wouldn't be able to help if I hadn't gone through all of that. So I went from feeling sorry for myself that all that happened to going, thank you for my painful experiences. And that was the title of one of my books, Succeed Because of What You've Been Through. I know that anybody can do it. It's not the only way, obviously, to succeed, but it's the way that I did it, was to mine the lessons out of what you've been through. Like, how did it change you? And normally when people say, no, I was a victim of a violent crime, and I'm not trying to make light of, but when we say it changed me, we mean it hurt me and I'm broken and I'm too broken to be fixed. And I want to say, no, you're not. What did you learn? And how did it break you open? I'm not denying. I mean, people are truly victimized, rape victims, things, awful things that happen in our lives, whether it's our choice, somebody else forced it upon us, or it's just a thing that happened, a plane crashes into your house. What are you going to do? You couldn't have prevented that. It doesn't matter. We're faced with these decisions, right? About how am I going to look at this? What am I going to do with this? And when you decide to start mining the lessons out of it and looking at how it changed you. Look at the empathy that you develop. Look at the courage that you showed, the bravery that it took to get through what you've been through, the determination, the tenacity, the perseverance. I mean, I could go on and on and on. The things that we learn in the hard times, I mean, the hardest times, those are the most valuable lessons. And when we take all of that, those are all nuggets of gold. And we take all of that and we take it to the workplace, and hopefully in the process, find our purpose. And we use those things to fulfill our purpose. I'm telling you, Kate, there's nothing like it. It's real success, which is all 5 facets that I talked about before. All of a sudden, you find that you do have good relationships, because really awesome people are sort of attracted to you. We're not attracted to people who have chips on their shoulder. We're just not, unless we have this thing about trying to fix people and make somebody a project. But I don't want somebody to feel sorry for me. Mm-hmm. I want friends who like that I'm, a goofball and knucklehead half the time, but they like me anyway, right? So it's that peace and joy and wellness and yes, financial provision when we're doing what we were built to do, what we were perfectly matched to do.
I love how you're talking about like how things that happen, because it is difficult, right? Like things that happen to you. There are bad people in the world. There are bad things that happen to people. But I've loved, even through this podcast, hearing survivors tell their story. And they're like, I've turned, I was a victim of something, but I've become a survivor and now I can help other people. And I think it's so important for us to think about that, things that we've experienced in our lives. And I have things from my childhood that it's like, well, I'm actually kind of grateful that these things happened, even though it was terrible and traumatic as a little kid. But like, those are things that led me to doing One Girl Revolution, because I know what it feels like to be silenced. I know what it feels like not to be heard or seen or ignored or marginalized. And so I think it's so important for all of us to look at our life and say, because of these things that happen to us, even the bad things, even the traumatic things, maybe I'm able to now help someone else. Or maybe that's the thing that led me, like you said, helped me find my purpose and helped me on this journey through life.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to talk about, okay, so in 2008, you sold your company and you transitioned over to being the chairperson of Successful Survivors Foundation, a nonprofit organization that you founded. Talk to me about Successful Survivors Foundation, more about your work, and I guess what made you start it.
Oh my gosh. Well, hope you're not sorry that you asked, because
I love a good story.
My husband right now would be going, oh no, here she goes. So I, in my decades of working with child welfare organizations, I had the opportunity to meet a lot of kids and speak to kids who have been severely abused, who've been trafficked. And I found that I would walk in a room full of kids, and they're like, oh, somebody made me be here. They're dead. They're just like, how soon can we get this over with? Right. And I would start to tell my story, and they would start to sit up, and then they would lean forward. Conversation stops. You could hear a pin drop, and they're with me. And the reason they were with me, Kate, even though I'm a million years older than them, I come from a different time. What I experienced was different from what a lot of them have experienced. What's common between us that created a bond was the feelings are the same. The feelings of shame, the feelings of being unwanted and unloved, and nobody's ever going to love me and nobody's ever going to want me. So why don't I use drugs? So why don't I sell drugs? Why don't I just, whatever? Because when you're not loved, when you don't feel like you have any dignity, any worth, any value, what difference does it make? Do whatever you want to do, hurt whoever you want to hurt in the process, right? So here I am saying to them, And as a result of all of this, here's the life I lead. And I didn't get here because I'm the smartest one or the prettiest one or the most athletic one or the best educated one. No, I got here because I am fully qualified and equipped to fulfill the good plan for my life. Each of us, that everybody listening to this podcast right now, you're qualified to do the thing that you were born to do. So when we think, oh, I can't do it because I didn't get the right education, or I was born on the wrong side of the tracks, or I didn't have a family that supported me, or I didn't, name it all, whatever. Okay, it's all part of the plan. And when you find the plan and you start living it and you start getting real success, there's a sense of contentedness that you can't get any other way. And I realized when I sold my company, I needed to share that message with the walking wounded, people who have experienced trauma, especially childhood trauma, not to minimize adult trauma, being, going through betrayal or being a victim of a violent crime, or, whatever it is that we go through. Yes, it's horrible. Everybody's trauma is painful. Everybody's pain is pain to them. So I'm not suggesting that we compare. When we look at childhood trauma, though, children are not able to contextualize. So if an adult says, well, you're a stupid fat loser, they don't have the ability to go, Uncle Joe was drunk when he said that. And, or, this one is just a knucklehead, or he's not quite right, or whatever. As a child, you just go, oh, yeah, I guess I am. If you don't have somebody else who's negating the negative messages, you just absorb the negative messages. So I thought, we've got to create Successful Survivors Foundation so that we can help people who have been through really tough stuff, get them to the point of survival, then help them thrive and find that good plan for their lives, and then live it and believe all the way along with mentors and community, believe that they can. And what's so cool about Successful Survivors Foundation is that when people hear that, okay, here's what that did in you, this terrible thing that happened. I'm sorry it happened. I wish it hadn't happened, but it's not happening now. So what we have to do is mind the lesson. So I'm going to tell you about you. You're stronger than the average person. You're more resilient. You're more resourceful. You're a faithful friend. When you're a friend, you're all the way friend. You're the friend they could call in the middle of the night, and I start talking to people. If that's them, then it resonates. And that's when the change that you asked me about for me, that's when it happens. When somebody else gives you the language to really name the things that you haven't been able to speak about because you just couldn't articulate it. I mean, for some of us, a lot of the trauma that happened before we had language. When you're a real little kid, you can't explain it later because you didn't have language when it happened. And so being able to now have language, being able to understand that you're not the only one, being able to understand that there's a future and a purpose, and that it actually makes you stronger than the average person to keep going, to get up. You could get knocked down 7 times, you're going to get up 8 times. All of that makes you feel seen and heard. And then you feel, if somebody else sees value in you, you begin to see value in yourself. So that's what we do. We're just all about that.
Building community is so important. And even if it's just one person, right? I'm sure that all the kids and people that you're working with too, it's like they just have one person that listens to them and gives them attention. And back to what you shared at the beginning, this dignity, just looking them in the eyes, being a support system, asking them what they need support with, and helping them find meaning and helping them find their purpose and happiness, right? Like we all need someone just to pay attention to us and just to talk about, even just to speak about things that we've experienced, the power that can have. So I'd love to hear a story, because this podcast obviously is all about stories, and obviously your story, but is there a story of maybe somebody that got in touch with the foundation and then kind of the step-by-step process of like how you were able to help them and how you were able to support them?
Oh, Kate.
I'm sure
Gosh.
there are many, actually. Now that I just asked that question, I'm like, you could actually write books and books and books of all the different people. But just for people that are listening, just to kind of get a snapshot of the work that you're doing with the foundation.
Oh my goodness. Well, there are so many, but one that kind of stands out in my mind. We did a collaboration with USC School of Social Work, and we had a 3-day kind of retreat thing. And we invited girls who were in the foster care system who had been trafficked. And I mean, it's the stories of these girls are just completely heartbreaking. Like their mother sold them. Their mother was the pimp. And that, so you hear these stories and you just, it's crazy. So these girls came in and they all had their heads down. None of them made eye contact. I mean, the shame, Kate, the shame was in their body language. It was in their facial expressions. They were like catatonic almost, not talking, just head down. And they, sat where were told to be sat. And they're just like this through the whole thing. And me, I have this personality, I have this booming voice, and I'm like, and they're not responding. And I've had these great experiences with kids, even though I'm an old woman, I have these great experiences with kids, and I'm thinking, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to reach them. And I thought, I just have to keep going. I just have to push through. And I wish I had the picture to show you. We went through the curriculum that I created. It's called the Your Real Success program. And it literally is walking them through mining the lessons from what they've been through and understanding how their experiences change them. And then going back to, how they were made, like, what were you interested in before this happened? Trying to figure out what were their passions and what kinds of intelligences do they have? What were their strengths and so on? Go through this whole program for 3 days. Kate, by the end of the time together, these girls are laughing and they're engaged and they're carrying on and they're like hugging me and let's get our pictures taken and all this. And it was the most beautiful thing. There was one girl in particular who was like the last one to just, lift her head and even make eye contact with me. And she, I think, was the most impacted by the whole experience. The last I heard was that she was in school. I think she was in a culinary school and wanted to be a chef. But it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I just can't express it enough. It's a beautiful thing when you see somebody really grasp their own worth and value and pricelessness.
Watch In Tandem, the new short documentary by One Girl Revolution, which highlights the incredible story of Caitlin Cullen and her restaurant in Milwaukee, The Tandem. The Tandem is more than a restaurant. It's a family, a community that at its height was a bustling restaurant serving food and supporting every single person who walked through its doors in one way or another. If someone needed a job, you got it. Having a bad day and needing a smile or a laugh, the Tandem's got you. Having a rough time and need support, the Tandem isn't just a restaurant, it's your family. They got you. When COVID hit in March 2020, the Tandem stepped up to serve the community in a new way. They stopped selling food to customers and started solely feeding people in need. The Tandem community ended up feeding over 115,000 people during the first year of the pandemic. Absolutely incredible. Get to know Caitlin and the Tandem story in One Girl Revolution's new short documentary, In Tandem. Watch In Tandem today at onegirlrevolution.com or on YouTube. Please watch and share this inspiring story. And just finding that, I love this idea. And I know you know that we have a documentary called The Girl Inside. And I love this idea of finding the little girl inside, of each and every one of us. And, we've all been through difficult things, some worse than others, of course. And even some of the girls that you're talking about, but it's like digging down and like before anything bad happened to us, before we had any traumas, like who was that little girl that was created to make a difference in this world? What was this little girl created to do and be? And we all need to be reminded of that. Like even as an adult, it's like I have to dig down and be like, okay, who is that little girl? Who is that person that I was created to be? And there's so much power in that, just revisiting that in our lives and finding that again. And that's what you're able to do through your work. And it's just so incredible to watch. And you're just so inspiring. And you do so many things too. You mentioned, I know you're a motivational speaker, you're an author, purpose seeker. People can obviously bring you to speak at their events. But talk to me about this new book that you have coming out. When is it coming out? And tell me about your 15th book. I'm so excited about it.
Oh, thank you. Well, so it's called 30 Days to Love. And it's just going to be a little hardbound, almost like a little gift book or whatever. It's not a heavy duty read. The idea is that if we don't have love in our lives, if we don't have love in our hearts, and I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm not talking necessarily about, I have to find somebody to love me. A lot of times wounded, broken people think that they have to find somebody, like they won't be complete if they don't find that person who completes them. No, sweetheart. That is a lovely thing. But I'm with my husband for 31 years because I choose to be, not because I need to be. We come into this life alone, we're going to exit alone. And we have to learn to love ourselves and to love others and to love our circumstances, whatever they are. We have to find a sense of gratitude. So 30 Days to Love is it's a tidbit every single day of how do you do that? And what's kind of fascinating about the whole thing is when we really embrace that, the old saying, love makes the world go round. Love really can change your life. It changes your circumstances. It changes your attitude, your countenance, your facial expressions, your body language. And when you're a loving person, the irony is you just attract people to you like a magnet. You'll have more, fabulous people in your life than you know what to do with, because we all want to be around people who have a good attitude and who are loving and kind and generous and all that. So really it's about that. It's a life-changing little 30-day journey, really.
Well, I'm so excited to read it, and I will be sure to promote it when it's out. And I want to encourage everybody to read your other books, and I'll be sure to link all the different places that people can follow you on Facebook and social media and your website. So if they want to get in touch with you, because you have so many great resources and you're doing so much great work. So I want everybody who's listening to check you out, follow everything that you're doing. I want to ask you, Rhonda, because I'm always curious, and I imagine that it probably has something to do with your life and your upbringing, but if you could get to the very root of why you do, what your driving force is every single day, what would you say that root is?
Oh, gosh, what a great question. Okay. I believe I'm a person of faith. So I believe that there is a purpose for my life. I believe through search, a lot of searching, that my purpose is to help other people find theirs. And so the root that drives me is I feel like God created me in my mother's womb, God bless her, wherever she is, whoever she is, and took the best DNA from her side and the best DNA from my father's side, wherever he is, and all that, and created the mixture that's me. And there's a verse in the Bible that's Ephesians 2:10, I think it is, that says that we're each God's masterpiece, created for a specific work. So if I'm a masterpiece of God and I'm created to help people find their purpose, that other people's success contributes to my purpose. So I'm never jealous. I'm never envious. When one of my friends has a success, and it doesn't matter, it can be a teeny little success, it can be a giant success, I'm celebrating, baby, because it's an amazing thing when you feel absolutely no envy. Nothing. It's all gratitude. It's all celebration. And that's what happens when you embrace your purpose. And you just, because you don't compare it to anybody else's purpose or anybody else's circumstances, or, all of the other nonsense just disintegrates.
Yeah. And that's so important in this day and age, especially with regards to women, because I feel like there's so much competition. Even you look at social media, and I've had other guests on this podcast where we've dug into that. Like, how do you bring women together? And really what you're doing is such a beautiful example to all of us. It's such a beautiful example to me. And we need to support our sisters and support one another. And if we see somebody doing good things, we need to stand up and support them in any way that we possibly can. So I just love everything that you're doing. And I'm so excited to continue to follow everything that you have going on. For people that are listening, what can they do to support your work? Obviously, they can follow you on social media, they can bring you to speak, but what are some other ways that people can get involved?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so go to successfulsurvivors.org and you'll see if you are a survivor of trauma, and gosh, who isn't, for crying out loud? I mean, I think we were all traumatized by COVID and, whatever.
Right.
So if you're a survivor, join us. And when I say join, I'm not talking about pay money or whatever. I'm talking about subscribe and get the information, and it just come alongside of us, because one of the reasons I love the name of your podcast and I love what you're doing is because every single person who's been through tough stuff, if they'll join and be in that community, then is educated, equipped, and empowered, encouraged to be that successful survivor for the influence of everyone in their lives. And so what we do when you begin to embrace, you find and fulfill your purpose, and you embrace who you are, it's contagious. Other people feel encouraged to do that. So I want to encourage everybody to do that. And if you haven't experienced trauma, join and be an ally, because we need people. We need the Janets of the world, the teachers, the Barb Nailers of the world. We need people who had wonderful upbringings and wonderful families, because we have to get a glimpse of, what that's supposed to look like in order to create it in our lives. And our big, fat, audacious, hairy goal initiative is the Love is Action Community Initiative. And that's a public, private, faith-based, secular, everybody come and share your love in whatever way you can with people who need it. So we help to strengthen fragile families. We help people who have been abused. We try to keep kids off of drugs. We try to prevent children from being lured into sex trafficking. There's so much that we do there, and you can find out about Love is Action at loveisaction.com. So join us.
So many ways, and I will be sure to post that in all the show notes so people can get in touch with you and follow what you're doing and get involved, because we all play a role. That's like, just like you said. And sometimes it's just that simple smile or listening to someone. We all know survivors. We all know people who have come through terrible traumas, and just being able to process with people and being that listening ear and that loving person too, just loving the people that are around us. And you were such an example of that, Rhonda. But I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast. I want to ask you this question because I always end this podcast on one question. So I'd like to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
Find your purpose and live it. We have one job, Kate. We have one job in this life, and it's to find and fulfill the purpose for which we were born and perfectly matched. And when we do that, oh my goodness, buckle up, buttercup, because you never know where it's going to take you. If somebody would have told me I was going to write a book and I was going to tell my story, I didn't tell anybody till I was 27 years old that my parents had left. I figured, well, you won't like me either if you know that my parents didn't like me. And so if somebody would have told me that I was going to write a book and tell the story on the stage, and I was going to be on the Today Show, and I was going to have a, private mass at the Vatican, I mean, I could just go on and on and on. Meet my hero, Tom Monahan, and not just meet him, have lunch with him, let me have breakfast with him, interview him. Oh my word, if somebody would have told me all that, I would have said, there's no possible way any of that is happening. But Kate, things just continue to happen, and I'm in awe, and I'm grateful. And it's a wild and crazy life when you follow your purpose. I want everybody to find and fulfill their purpose. It'll be a better world when we do.
Well, you're doing that, and you're encouraging so many other people. And like you mentioned, I think when we find our purpose, we can encourage other people and help other people find their purpose too, because it inspires. It's like a ripple effect where, we find our purpose and it encourages other people. But Rhonda, I am so grateful to have had you on the podcast. Thank you for being on the podcast, and thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Oh, thank you, Kate. I love One Girl Revolution. You keep on going, girl.
Hey, thank you so much.
Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number one girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number one girlrevolution.com.